Let's turn our attention to a new poll that's out today, exclusive poll for the Global Warming Policy Foundation. And YouGov has carried out some polling for them, looking at energy policy and, what the public want done when it comes to tackling climate change or indeed worrying about their energy bills. Well, let's talk about this with Harry Wilkinson, who's head of policy at the Global Warming Policy Forum. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
This is absolutely fascinating because what you've discovered is, and perhaps it shouldn't be as much of a surprise, is that people's views on what or how much and what and if the government should do anything about tackling climate change, or as opposed to tackling the issue of very high energy bills for people, this has cut down very clearly on party lines. Can you tell us the details?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, I think. We wanted to actually ask people to put climate change in the context of thinking about government energy policy, because a lot of surveys ask people, well, do you want to cut your emissions? Do you want the country to cut its emissions? And of course people say yes, and most people do want to see our emission footprint go down. But actually the reality is these choices come with trade-offs. So we asked which of these priorities should the government focus on most of all, either stronger climate change targets or reducing energy bills for households. So we commissioned YouGov to do a survey, and we found that amongst Conservatives, 57% said reducing energy bills for households should be a bigger priority, compared to only 30% who said stronger climate change targets. And then with Labour voters, it was the other way around. So it was 58% who wanted stronger climate change targets, compared to only 34% who said reducing energy bills for households. And then we saw a similar division amongst Remainers and Leavers, and then amongst what are known as ABC1 voters.
Middle class, basically middle class versus working class voters.
Yeah.
Also, so basically, if you're a Conservative voter, if you voted Leave, if you're working class, if you live, for instance, I think also it was a geographical divide, wasn't it, in the North and the Midlands, you're more likely to prioritise lower energy bills, whereas if you live in London, the South, you're middle class, you voted Remain, you vote Labour or Liberal Democrat, odds are you're in favour of prioritising tackling climate change. So this is going to be the next big political divide when it comes to government policy, isn't it?
Well, it could well be. And on the one hand, maybe it's not that surprising that working class voters want lower energy bills. But on the other hand, I think it's sort of immensely encouraging that the good working people of this country have listened to the relentless hysteria about climate change, the relentless exaggeration from almost every worthy that you can imagine on the planet, and they've said, no, actually, we want lower energy bills. And I think this speaks to a sort of growing value divide between maybe urban metropolitan types and those in the rest of the country.
But also, one of the key things there is that when we talk about some of the policies, say, people, the support that there was for Extinction Rebellion that we saw in polls when they were carrying out all these demonstrations in London and other major cities around the world, lots of people were giving their support. But when you actually explained, well, here's what Extinction Rebellion's policies, by 2025 having zero net carbon emissions, this will mean not just you have to have an electric car. This means no cars of any kind, no trains of any kind, no flying, probably no central heating. Basically we're going back sort of a minimum of 100 years in terms of our lifestyle. And then people start going, oh, hold on a minute. It turns out I'm not quite so sure. A lot of these sort of virtue signalling values that people have, people are concerned about plastic in the oceans. People are concerned about climate change. When you actually give the actual facts of it, okay, if you are concerned, these are the things that we're asking you to do, as in paying a lot more tax, giving up lots of the things that you value in your life, like your own car and the heating and foreign holidays. People can change their tune rather quickly, don't they?
They do, and we ask people as well about which kind of actions they would be willing to take personally to reduce their emissions. And we saw that still many people are unwilling to take these actions personally. And in particular, going vegan was very unpopular. But we also found there weren't more than 25% of people on any single option that we asked about who said they were very likely
to support those particular issues.
That.
But this is the thing, this has lots of bearing for what this Boris Johnson government, definitely the next 5 years, who knows, given the state of the polls, could be longer, what they plan to do, because they are committed to net zero emissions by 2050. The Labour Party, I think it was 2030. The Greens going with Extinction Rebellion 2025. Even by 2050, we are talking about spending, I think, the estimate's something in the region of £1 trillion in total to try and achieve that.
And a lot of that is having to sort of change the heating system of every single house in the country.
Well, that's not happening for free, is it?
Exactly, and this is going to be enormously expensive, because not only do you need an expensive new air pump or ground source heat pump, and there's some other alternatives as well installed, you then probably are then fixed with higher energy bills after that. So it's going to be very difficult to persuade anyone that this is a good idea.
It's going to be fascinating. And in terms of people's view on climate change, again, this becomes one of those debates where anyone who says, I'm not quite sure that this is the right course of action, you're a climate denier, you're a climate change denier, as opposed to someone questioning how we deal with the problem, but also the extent of the problem. Because we have got an awful lot of people. Lord Attenborough was doing it, Sir David, I've given a peerage unnecessarily there. Has been talking about this, and Greta Thunberg as well. And the exaggerating of what is actually in scientific reports on climate change has really gone off the scale, hasn't it?
People are only getting one side of the facts. I agree we should listen to the scientists, but yes, let's also listen to them when they're saying that actually there's no more drought in the global landscape than there was before. There's areas where it's getting worse, but there's also areas where it's getting better. You look at the same for floods. Perhaps floods are actually getting less likely than they were before, and we're seeing sort of no real trends in many extreme weather events.
I think yet tornadoes, hurricanes, cyclones, and even actually bushfires in Australia over the entire country. The number of bushfires has gone down. It's just we've seen two particular states who've had horrific, extensive bushfires, which caused horrible damage, and we're seeing that play out. But actually that's not representative of what's happened in Australia at large.
Yes, and of course the key thing is not just what are the meteorological conditions, it's also, how well can we deal with it? And you look 100 years ago, and huge numbers of people were killed in extreme weather events every year. And we've seen that number come down by perhaps 99%. So you're 99% less likely. And then the overall numbers have come down something like 95%. So the world is a much better place. And it's a better place because we've had huge amounts of economic growth. And the facts around climate change need to be put into that context. But I think when you're looking at this government, and yes, we've seen the commitments that we've seen, but they're faced with a political dilemma now. Either they support their own voters' concerns about energy bills, and we see more action on getting energy bills down, or they can appeal to this metropolitan bubble who are concerned about climate change, but that's increasingly not their voters.
Yeah.
Although it may be politically expedient, but it's also morally the right thing to do, because we're seeing tens of thousands of people die in the cold each winter. Energy bills being too high is a very, very serious issue.
Harry Wilkinson, I have to leave it there, Head of Policy at the Global Warming Policy Forum.